You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody. Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail dream. Have you ever dreamt of hiking the AT? Bruce Matson did, so we're going to follow him every step of the way. Hello everybody and welcome back to Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail Dream, sponsored by our friends at Trailtopia. We're on to episode number 29 this week and what would have been Bruce's 12th week on the trail. But it isn't. He's back home. Bruce has taken several days away from the trail, returning home for his daughter Brooke's graduation and spending time with family and friends. I know he has always sounded in control of things while he's been away, but he's now really in his own domain and this week is very laid back. So I thought it'd be a great chance for him to reflect upon his journey so far and discuss it in more broad terms. Also, our great sponsor Trailtopia played along nicely, providing 2 meals and 2 questions from listeners. With that great segue, of course, I can move smoothly onto this. How about those days when you struggle through the morning, probably got 10 miles under your belt, and breakfast is a distant memory? It's lunchtime and, you could always have your full Snickers of the day for yet another sugar rush. But sitting there in an empty shelter, protected from the bitter wind, I'm sure you'd really rather have Trailtopia's beef-flavoured ramen noodles with green beans, corn and mushrooms. D-flippin'-licious. And if you need to go without the gluten, all of Trailtopia's ramen noodle lunches and light dinners are available gluten-free. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. So, with a very relaxed Bruce, comfortably ensconced in his home, let's catch up with him just a day before he returned to the trail on Friday morning. Okay, we're back with Bruce and it's time to catch up and look back. Hi Bruce, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing really well.
Good, yeah, and I actually just saw Bruce on video. I almost didn't recognise him. He's changed a lot. He's lost a lot of weight. First, what's it like to be back home with several days to rest and revive?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked me that. I've been a very busy week, very productive and very relaxing at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, I think I have this ability to compartmentalize and transition relatively easily. So some people have said, "Well, is it really strange to be in a building? Is it really strange to be sleeping in a bed?" And maybe I'm not observant, but it's been relatively simple to come home and get right into the few things I need to do here and sleep in a bed again. So it's been fun. A lot of people, have been following, and it's kind of been fun to hear their questions. And probably the biggest reaction is similar to yours, which is like, I barely recognize you. You really look good, but you clearly have lost a lot of weight. But most people have viewed that positively.
Yeah, of course. I mean, do you feel well?
I feel very well. And I really, you know, I think this week, even though if in a perfect world, and I don't know why I say this, but in a perfect world, it would have been great if I had gotten to Harper's Ferry and then come off the trail and it'd be like, perfect mid-trip visit. But a couple things, I've still got a little tiny pain in my back that I keep managing. And
Right.
I was in the middle of switching shoes, and it has actually just proved to be a great week to refresh and re-energize, to get to see the girls and Cheryl, get to see some
Yeah.
friends. And let's face it, I'm having a week long zero as it relates to hiking and exercise. And I think it's going to serve me really well to give my back the whole week off. And there's always a few other aches and pains. So
Yeah.
I think it came at a great time. And I don't know how much you have been observant of the weather in Virginia and the East,
Very much, yeah.
but I have been the luckiest guy in the world because I have missed almost 5 straight days of thunderstorms and rain showers. Hopefully, summer has not come already and we've skipped spring. But the last week or so in Virginia is almost classic Virginia summer weather where it's hot and humid, and there's been a lot of thunderstorms and rain and hard rain. And I just got lucky and I was off the trail.
Wow, I think the luck has been following you throughout this, which is great. But part of this, I'm sure, is down to your preparation. I think your preparation has been not not to my chagrin, but it's been much more useful than I ever imagined preparation would be. And listening to you has made me think if I ever did this again, I might very well have to prepare a bit better than I did last time. But I've been very we've been very lucky that Trailtopia have been supporting us throughout, and they've allowed me to give away two lots of for two lots of questions this week. So I'd like to start with those. Okay.
Certainly.
Lovely. Right. This is from Lisa Parker. And the question is Lisa says, I also plan to start the AT going Nobo from Springer in late February 2019. My reasons are concern of tenting sites filling up, not wanting to feel rushed to finish by Katahdin's closing date. And I want the best odds for nice weather for my summit photo. Was Bruce pleased with his start date? What were the pros and cons? And would he choose the same time frame if he did it again?
Yeah, I still am pleased with my start date. I would choose it again. Getting into Virginia now and hitting this warm weather reminded me that among the reasons I picked an early start date was to avoid too much hot summer weather.
Yeah.
I've lived in Virginia now a very long time, and the one of the controlling principles was I will not hike through Virginia in July. Yeah, I just know what it's like here. The point is, I clearly enjoy hiking in the cool and even the cold more than the heat. So that still is a very important principle to me.
Sure.
Another interesting observation, which again was among the reasons, was the ability to avoid the obnoxious flying insects for a long period of time.
Yes.
One thing we haven't spoken about is I have not yet used any insect repellent after 73 days on the trail. Now,
Wow. Why is that?
well, because there haven't been any bugs. Now, with that said, it's interesting and ironic and coincidental, or whatever words we want to use, that the last 2 days in the Shenandoah, I started to see and sense the bugs and would have to swipe them away from my face a little bit,
Right.
slap them a little bit. But we were high enough and there was breeze enough that, and my hiking partner, one of my buddies came out for 5 days. He was using it and I was resisting it because I really don't like putting that on if I don't have to.
Yeah.
And I kind of just did a little test and I was able to get through those 2 days with very little annoyance without using any insect repellent. But with that said, with the warmth and the bugs coming out, I fully expect tomorrow when I go back on the trail, it will be sort of full on bugs, and I will be into a summer mode, which again makes it kind of interesting and coincidental that I took this break when I did.
Yes. I was thinking that actually because I know you've got I was going to ask about bugs generally, but I know you had a lot of rain on the trail this week. So I presume if the sun comes out and the rain goes away, the bugs are going to be really moving, aren't they?
I think so. And it's been warm enough, even without the rain, the week before as they started to pop. Spring has clearly popped in a very quick way the
Yeah.
last 10 days in terms of wildflowers and birds and some animals. I still haven't seen a bear or a snake. But to finish the answer to the question, I think I would still really like the start date. The counterbalancing concern, which kind of goes with your comments about preparation, is we got hit with, I think most people have now concluded, a much tougher winter than normal. And
Yeah.
some people might say well, that's why you shouldn't leave when Bruce left. However, um, obviously it wasn't easy, but I do think the preparation helped a lot. And a lot about preparation is, preparing for situations that may or may not happen, right? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the people who suffered through the Smokies and some of these snowstorms were just kind of rolling the dice and thinking they could go ultralight and not have certain um, equipment that makes a difference. But my
Mm.
point about all that is one, preparation can get you through the unexpected. But for I think it's Lisa, for her, while it was a very, very harsh, difficult winter, the likelihood of that repeating itself is not high. So I think
Mm.
you're likely to get a nice, cool, cold first month. Hopefully, not with the harsh weather. But if the harsh weather comes, um, hopefully you have the right gear and preparation. And it's easy for me to say this now, but after the fact, it's a bit of a badge of honor,
Yes, you said before that.
and you've kidded with me appropriately that, well, Bruce wanted snow, Bruce wanted the challenge of winter
Mm.
camping, and he got it, and he got it in a significant way. Did want that, and I did get that, and of course I did get it, probably more than I would have planned if I had a perfect ability to control the weather. But for a lot of those reasons, I think the crowding was not a problem. And even today, now I'm not down south, of course, and I do understand that in the bubble, there may be 50 tents at some of those early sites. But I do think she's right in the sense that with an early start, you will have less crowding. And I can't say I've really ever had crowding at a site yet. Um, but I've also only camped by myself once. There's enough activity out there with early starters that there's plenty of social time. At least there's social time when it's not bitter cold.
This is a bit of a follow on because the second question was from Curtis Tavares, who is a friend of mine from the Mighty Blue Show. He says, I was wondering if Bruce had considered an umbrella as the temperatures warm during the summer months. He said, I personally had great success wearing just my kilt and having an umbrella over my head. Please, if you do that, I want to see a picture of that, Bruce. Some spots were a bit too tight to have the umbrella up, but largely it was very useful. And at 8 ounces, it was worth the additional weight because it definitely helped regulate heat in the warmer months. And he says, as a bit of an aside, he says that I've lost what the aside is. Anyway, but the aside was he was able to fix it to the various belts and straps that go around the pack. So, have you ever did you consider an umbrella?
I have, in fact, for those listening who are inclined to do a lot of planning, using an umbrella would sound like a crazy idea to me. First time I
Yeah.
saw it, I never considered it. I thought it was crazy. But the more I looked into it, I watched videos and I read some blogs, and there's some very talented, experienced hikers who are big advocates of umbrellas. And then I
Mm.
looked into the types of umbrellas and the weight, and I looked at how people can affix them sort of to their pack, like the questioner mentioned. So I have selected an umbrella. I have not purchased it, but I'm ready to do so. And I'm really thinking that in the next month or so, as it warms up and the rain comes, I'm probably going to get that ordered and sent to me. I really have spoken to enough people and seen the benefits of it. And the one thing I did worry about and wonder about was the idea that in some of the more narrow trails with vegetation, whether it gets in the way.
Yes, I'm sure.
I've gotten some very strong recommendations, and there's a lot about the umbrella I like. There's a lot about staying dry in the heat that's a problem anyway. So I think that God willing, I make it up the trail a little farther for the next few months. I think you'll probably see me using an umbrella somewhere, and maybe I wish I had it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I am really. It's actually one of the things that I think I'm going to add as I start getting to the summer.
I tell you what, I really see that picture of you in just a kilt and an umbrella, and that would be funny. Now, firstly, now I know you're going back tomorrow. Any doubts about going back? Are you good to go? Because when we spoke when we were on the phone earlier on, you said you're there's a lot more hiking to be done. So your mindset is still getting back on the trail.
Very much so. It's no reservations. I thought I shouldn't stay off the trail too long, because I don't know what that would mean for my mental
Yeah,
state. I think
yeah,
I targeted today or tomorrow as the day to go back. And I actually have been very busy handling a few personal things and a couple of business matters. Um, and of course, by handling those, it reduces any stress being on the trail. So, but I've been
Yes, yes.
busy enough that I actually today is the only day I have, believe it or not, that's focused on swapping out some winter gear for summer gear, figuring out some resupply, plotting out the next 3 weeks in a general way so I know what kind of resupply I need to do. I'm swapping out shoes. So there's a bunch of little things. I broke both steel tips on my
Oh,
poles.
did you?
I ran by REI and I think they've got some replacements. So there's a lot of little things like that that I need to do.
Tell you what you need. I think you need, and when you get to the rocks in Pennsylvania, getting rubber tips over those steel tips might be useful because you're
Absolutely.
going to wear them down.
I couldn't agree more. And I've actually done that because one of the things I really dislike on the trail is when you plant a pole and maybe with a little vigor and the steel hits a rock and that kind of shakes
Yeah.
through your arm. I really dislike that feeling. So I thought that
Yeah.
for Pennsylvania rocks, I would use those tips, and I did acquire those rubber tips to put over the steel for those rocky stretches.
Now, I know you've been a great preparer, and we talked about that obviously in the past. But when you were back at the Arch, at the Arch, back at Amicalola about, I don't know, 3 months ago, how real was your confidence then? Was it as were you as confident as you looked? Because you've sounded pretty confident most of the time. Or were there those one or two niggling doubts just as you took those first steps?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely, there was doubt. I probably have the ability, maybe from legal training, to act and sound confident, but I think a big portion or a big difference between then and now is there's a confidence that is very real, and I don't hopefully
Sure.
not in a obnoxious hubris sort of sense. But if you've hiked 400, I said this a little bit when I got to Damascus. If you've done 400 or 500 miles, and now I've done over 900 miles,
Yeah.
if you get that far, you have to have acquired some level of competence. And with that competence and that success of getting through those miles, whether it be hiking or camping or cooking or just dealing with the physical and mental challenges, there should be a level of confidence. And I do have this, I can sense a more relaxed confidence about the task at hand, the hiking and the camping and the movement up the trail. And I think um, I am really looking forward to, at a certain level, enjoying the hike in a different way because I think I was, as much as I'm kind of one of these people like, if I put my mind to something, I can do it. But I got out there. I've never been on a hike where I had to resupply. And once you get out there 5, 6, 7, 8 days, this is for most people new territory. And I was worried about, can I really do this? And as much as I thought I could, how hard is doing 12 or 15 miles, and how hard is it to climb a really steep mountain with a pack after you've done it for 10 days. And
Yeah.
it also goes with another observation that I've sort of had, which is the difference between the mental and the physical side of the trip. And we talked
Yeah.
about this a lot before I left. And most people say it's much more mental than physical.
Yeah.
And I thought it would be more mental than physical. And I do think that in the early days, your mental state is very related to your physical state, if you know.
Yes.
And so it's only more recently switched to be more of a mental thing than a physical thing because, I was trying to gain that fitness and confidence that I could
Yeah.
actually, I am 60 years old. And as much as I'm pretty confident about my abilities, I still deep down knew there was a pretty significant challenge out there. And there still is one up ahead. But
Yeah. Well, I refer to this as getting into the rhythm of the hike, and I think you seem to have got into the rhythm of the hike really, really well. And it's just that feeling you know your job almost, don't you? Because your job is pretty much the same every day. You just have a different platform to do it on. You know, you got sometimes you got views, sometimes you haven't got views, but you're walking along at a pace at which you're comfortable and which you know you can do, and that confidence, it to me, is the rhythm of the hike.
yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. The rhythm of the hike. I like that. And I would agree. That's a good descriptor. And I think I am sort of in that rhythm. And you just kind of, when you deal with the daily challenges or excitement, it's you kind of take it more in stride. And
Yeah.
so I do have a very uh, good sense and confidence and happiness about where I'm at and where I'm going. I still know that it's going to be a substantial task to get to Katahdin.
Yeah.
Again, I think when you get through certain number of miles, you gotta feel like
I can do this.
you got so you avoid injury and keep enjoying it, and you should be able to get to Maine.
Yeah. And was there a moment you mentioned the cold weather, and you had really fierce weather for about 2 months, didn't you? 2 and a bit months. Was there ever a moment when you were sitting in your tent or even just walking along on the trail when you thought to yourself, this is just too much? Did you ever get that moment?
I never did.
Wow.
Almost every night when I sort of get settled in my tent and you're doing tasks, and I always have this moment when I lay back um, and just sort of prop up my head and give a big exhale and go, wow, we got another day done. And I always take the moment to say, I'm lying on the ground here. I've been sleeping on the ground. It's not always comfortable and it's cold sometimes.
Yeah.
And I actually ask myself most nights, do I still want to do this? And I really haven't had this feeling like, this you've done this long enough, Bruce. Get home, enjoy. I'm not saying that every day is perfect. I've had plenty of days where they just weren't fun days,
Yeah.
but I haven't had this nagging sort of devil on my shoulder saying, "Time to quit. Go home. Enjoy the warm bed and roof over your head." So that's been a good thing. I don't know if it's a good analogy or not, but I've run a number of marathons in the past.
Yeah.
And there are times when you're running a marathon when you say, I can't do this anymore. I want to walk. I want to quit. And you fight that devil on your shoulder who's trying to get you to quit. I haven't had that kind of temptation sort of thrown at me. So,
Awesome. That's awesome, though.
yeah,
You must feel pretty good about that. Yeah.
going well enough that I've been able to chase that away. So,
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've noticed very much so, and I know you were very intentional about some of your hostel stops. You knew what you wanted to go to. You wanted to experience some of these hostels, and you found what appear to have been just gems. How have these stops contributed to your overall well-being?
sure. It's hard to know for sure, but um, I think for me, these stops have been important because they do give you a day or two. So oftentimes I've tried to combine them with come in and then take a zero and really enjoy the experience. I
Yeah.
do think, and some purists might say, well, you need to stay on the trail and you need to stay in your tent and you need to go all the way. And if
Yeah.
that's the right way, I'm just not doing it that way. I think those stops have been and will continue to be important for me to do just sort of a refresher, a re-energizing, cleaning your clothes, cleaning yourself, sleeping in a bed perhaps, having a meal at a hostel or in town. I think those stops have been and will continue to be crucial, mostly for my mental state rather than anything physical about the hike.
That's exactly what I was thinking. In fact, every time you've talked about these things, I've been struck by how enthused you are about where you've stayed. I know that I stayed at some places which I really liked, and one or two I thought were just awful. But you've really chosen these places well. So, and I'm sure that does help with your mindset and your mental state. So that's a big thing. Now, I want you to talk about, if you can, one or two of the kindnesses that you've seen on the trail. People often talk about the kindness of strangers, and I know you've had a few experiences as well, haven't you?
I have. I had a really, really hard day early in the trip on a miserable, rainy, cold day. And I had a couple of buddies I was hiking with. They were a little ahead of me. We had agreed we would go to a certain tenting spot that night. And it was early. It was probably day 7, 6. I can't remember. I could probably go figure it out. It was outside of Hiawassee. And I came down Unicoi Gap, and it was really, really hard hike. And I was tired, and I just wasn't sure I could get the 3 more miles, which actually would be down into the gap and then back up the mountain on the other side. And
Yeah.
I said to myself, if there's a car waiting there for to take me into Hiawassee, I'm getting in a car. And um, believe it or not, as I crossed the road, a car pulled in. Another hiker I knew got in the car. He yelled over to me, "Are you going to Hiawassee?" And I said, "I guess I am." But the real story is the next day I went back, of course, to that same spot to continue the hike. And I had decided to do this slack pack to Dick's Creek to try to catch up to my friends because that was the
Yeah.
day. It was my biggest day ever. And when I got to the trailhead, I'd left my phone back at the hotel in Hiawassee.
Oh God.
And I said, "What am I going to do?" And I was very reluctant to do this hike without my phone where I needed to call for the shuttle at the end of the day. And Cheryl had begged me not to hitchhike. But now I'm standing and it's 20 degrees, very cold. Would have been fine if I was hiking. Clear,
Yeah.
cold day. And I'm sitting there in Unicoi Gap with no phone. And I decide, okay, I have no choice but to hitchhike back into town, get my phone, and figure out. And just as I walked over to the road to hitchhike back into town, a car pulls up. An older gentleman got out to continue his through hike from the year before, and they asked me a question, and I said, "You're not happen to go into Hiawassee from here, are you?" And she was actually going the other way, but long story short, she changed her plans and took me into Hiawassee. So
Amazing.
those type of things are amazing. Of course, the ultimate trail magic there. And the other story I'll tell is from a hiker. I thought this was just incredibly kind. I was hiking not too long ago. It was right after my back was starting to bother me 4 or 5 days ago, and ran into actually a big listener to the podcast. Who the first time I met him a couple of weeks ago, he said, "You're RTK. I want to." And he told he had listened to all the podcasts, and we ran into each other. I told him he was like most people, they're quicker hikers than me, but we stopped and talked for a while. And I told him I was really struggling a little bit with comfort of my pack and my back. And we chatted and he wished me well, and we expect to see each other again. But about an hour later, I got a text from him, or whenever I had coverage. He had taken the time, probably sat down shortly afterwards, and he wrote me a very long text and had 4 ideas and recommendations to try to deal with the back pain that I was having. And I thought that was
Nice.
nicest thing in the world, that in the middle of his hike, he stopped, he shared some experiences he had, and suggested some things that might be a way to help me. So those are a couple stories that I think are pretty significant.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, to be honest with you, that is the definition of trial magic. I used to think trial magic was when you come to a gap and somebody was going to give you food. And I still think that's a pretty magical thing to do. But I think it's the serendipity of those moments. That woman who happened to bring the through hiker up, who changed the plans to take you back to Hiawassee to get your phone, stuff like that. That is trail magic. That's when things happen unexpectedly and in the way you want it to. The trail provides, and it's one of those expressions that people use, perhaps overuse sometimes, but it is definitely something that exists within the trail, isn't it?
Yeah, it's and there's been some others, so I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Now, look, one last question, and it's it's I want you to look back to February the 25th, was it? 20 something like that, 20 something when you started. Is there one piece of advice that you would now give to the fat bloke who walked through the arch 11 or 12 weeks ago?
I think, as I said to you before, I'd be a little more open to changing your plans to fit your mood, the weather, and your experience.
Sure.
Done well with my schedule. It's rather remarkable in some ways. Silly to think that, and of course, I didn't really think I would keep to a perfect schedule. But as you know, I modeled out the whole trip, but particularly the first half of the trip, and I only really came up about a week slower than I had planned.
Not
But
bad.
I have now tried to be honest with myself and the experience. And I mentioned this to you in a recent discussion we had where if I'm honest with myself, I think I kept looking at my plan and my plan each day and the number of miles I wanted to go and where I was going to stay. And I think I probably sort of bolted myself to that schedule more than was prudent. Like a good example was when I did that first slack pack I ever did, when I, forgot my phone. I was determined to get back in schedule with these guys I was hiking with, and I took on an 18-mile day that I had never attempted before.
Yeah.
And the only time I got a blister was that day, which was 10 days in the hike. And I'm convinced that the only reason I got the blister was I was slack packing, which allowed me to hike quicker. And I think I created more friction with the speed of my pace or my lack of attention to my shoes. And two small blisters went away after about 3 days, and I've never had anything else. But again, I was, it's an example of me trying to stay to the schedule rather than say, hey, it was really bad weather going to Unicoi Gap. I'm wet,
Yeah.
tired, it's cold. There's nothing embarrassing about taking a shuttle into Hiawassee for a night and enjoy it. And of course, as you know, when you get into town like Hiawassee, I had a great time in the town because you start running into people you didn't know they were in
Absolutely.
town. You're at the same
Absolutely.
restaurant. All of a sudden, you got eight guys
Mm.
surrounding a table, just sharing a meal for 2 hours and meeting each other and sharing experiences. And those things you should probably let happen a little more organically than being so scheduled out.
I totally agree, Bruce. But I bet you've got a schedule for the next few weeks, haven't you? On your return.
I have a schedule, and of course, you need some scheduling. I mean, you got to
Yeah, I
do
know.
a week supply.
Yeah.
But I've made this sort of pledge to myself to be a little more spontaneous on the trip, and if there's a waterfall that is just a perfect place to hang out for the afternoon, uh, I'm not going to. I hope I'm going to try to say it doesn't matter if I spend 3 hours here, and it doesn't matter if I lose 5 miles that I was planning to
Yeah.
hike. I'll make it up another day, or I'll just make the trip last another day.
Well, you sound really well, and I'm really pleased that we caught up before you go back. So good luck for tomorrow. I'm sure it's going to be great to be back out there again. And we'll catch up with you on the trail next, all right?
Yeah, I'll be in Harper's Ferry, before the week's over.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, mate. Well, enjoy yourself. Have a great time, and we'll speak soon, all right?
All right, thanks so much, Steve. You be well.
Cheers then.
All
Bye.
right, bye bye.
I tell you, the thought of a picture of Bruce in a kilt and just an umbrella hovering over his head is one I simply can't get out of my mind. Look out for that, hopefully in the near future. Didn't he sound good? He's had such a wonderful couple of months and even managed to miss some lousy weather on his stay at home. I was a little concerned that he hadn't started spraying himself to keep the bugs away, but I guess the cold weather has kept them under control. This time last year I was at Trail Days in Damascus and I recall noticing them there. I think Bruce also had an excellent point about the confidence that comes from putting in the miles. I've long contended that nothing can truly prepare you for this adventure. You learn it as you go along, and Bruce has, by walking those 900 plus miles, got into the rhythm that you obtain on the trail. Even I got the rhythm and was very conscious of it as I hiked. By the time I got to the northern states, my rhythm was carrying me through some of those really tough days. By the way, thanks so much to Lisa Parker and Curtis Tavares for their questions. I need your addresses so that Trailtopia can send you each a couple of meals. Drop me a line at steve@mightyblueontheat.com. Of course, that's the address for all questions to the show. Getting back to Bruce, his planning of hostels has been really helpful for him, and that is certainly something I've taken away from his journey. Sometimes it's the downtime in a proper bed, in a restaurant, or just in the warmth of a building that can reignite your hike. Bruce was very intentional in his choices and they have served him well. Lastly, it was nice to hear him articulate what trail magic really is. It is that serendipitous moment when something totally unexpected, yet something so helpful, comes your way, as if by, well, magic. Don't get me wrong, turning up at a road to find somebody grilling eggs and burgers is in a class of its own. When I was on the trail, I couldn't have imagined anything better, but now, with the benefit of 4 years hindsight, I wouldn't call it magic. It's that other stuff that really enhances your life that is the true magic. I wonder if you disagree. Let me know. So, as you listen to this, Bruce is back on the trail and slogging his way north to Maine. Join us next week to find out what his return has been like. Bruce and I will see you next week.